Welcome back or welcome to the Tiny Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nunn. Each week, I share an idea on psychology, magic, mindset that hopefully gives you a small shift in your perspective, how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you see others. And yes, today I am in the studio. So I've finally sorted a studio out, which I'll be filming and recording each week, and pretty excited about this. Nice little setup. Got a Rodecaster in front of me, got a beautiful camera. So welcome. If you haven't joined me before, thank you for joining it. The podcast is by miracle is growing, which is quite incredible. The last episode doubled in numbers. I'm really excited. So thank you for everyone who has taken the time to sort of listen to this. You know, it was a big goal at the start of the year to sort of release a podcast while I was about to have a baby, but it's been quite incredible. So it's been such an amazing journey, and I'm looking forward to sort of sharing this with you guys. And I've also been really busy. So those of you who've been keeping in touch, or maybe you saw me on stage. I've been speaking a lot, a couple of times a week, all over the country for some really big organizations. On Monday, I was with KFC, and it was quite incredible at Cairns Convention Center. With 1,000 people. It was quite remarkable to be sitting there sharing my sort of talk and my ideas. And over the next 6 or 7 weeks, I'm going to be trying to do something that's going to be quite challenging. So I wanted to set a goal to sort of share with you guys of how my sort of mindset and how I'm working towards UTMB, UTA. So Ultra Trail Australia, 100-mile race on the 15th of May. I'll be attempting to sort of finish this race, and it's quite a scary goal. 100 miles is a long way, 160 kilometers. Someone asked me how many days that's going to take me, and hopefully it will take me about one day, about 24 hours if everything goes well. But the truth is, I just don't know. Now, I've been an ultra runner for about 10 years. I did my first one when I was on my 30th birthday, and I'm going to be 40 soon. I've attempted the 100-mile distance 3 times, and each time I failed. And it's been pretty rough. The first time was Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, where you circumnavigate Mont Blanc Massif. So it's 10,000 meters of vert. There's about 180 kilometers, and I made it about 120 kilometers in. You start at night, there's thousands of people. It's quite unbelievable. Everyone's screaming and shouting. There was a guy with a chainsaw literally screaming in my face. It was quite wild, but it was an incredible experience. Watching the sunrise over Mont Blanc was one of the most memorable experiences I ever had. Ultimately, my body sort of shut down. I think I messed up my hydration and sodium balance, and I had to pull out 120 kilometers. And the next one was UTA last May. I had really big expectations. My training was amazing. I'd won a couple of races leading up to it. And I was aiming for top 10. And this is a trail major. So I was being quite ambitious. But sadly, a week before, I badly rolled my ankle. I probably shouldn't have started the race, but I started anyway. And my injury, caused me to sort of pull out quite far into it. But I just couldn't continue. And that sort of led to a series of problems because I started the race. I probably should have known that it was a bad idea and just cut my losses. But I think it's important to sort of recognize with these ultra marathons, it's not just a race, it's the hundreds of hours of the last 3 years. If you just look at that, close to over 1,000 hours of running, 10,000 kilometers, travel around the world, all the gear, the costs of doctor visits and x-rays and all this sort of stuff to make sure I'm okay. And it takes its toll. There's a lot of sacrifices, and I'm expecting a lot from the people in my family, my friends, who crew me, my wife, who's been incredible. She supports all these crazy adventures that I do, which is quite remarkable. And I think it's really important to recognize that this isn't just, it is a very selfish sort of approach, but I do get a lot from it. It's part of my life. It gives me purpose. It gives me meaning. And a big part of what I realized that's changed over the last few years is my sort of mindset with ultra running. And I'm going to create a 4-part series because I work, with teams, sales teams, companies on mindset. That's my main focus, my main topic. And I wanted to share on this podcast what I'm going to go through over the next 7 weeks until race day. I'm going to do a 4-part series. So in each episode, I'm going to break down a different part that you can use, not just in ultra running, but in any area of your life. If you're attempting a goal or you want to try and do a hard thing, and this can be a creative pursuit, this can be physical, it can be mental, it can be whatever you like. I'm putting together this 4-part series that's going to have a worksheet with each. And hopefully, you can listen along. You can sort of understand what your why is, how you can get purpose and what meaning from whatever you strive for, and how you can really strive for excellence, and how you can do hard things that sometimes make you feel uncomfortable, and why I believe it's really important for us to sort of express ourselves in this way. Not necessarily ultra running, it can be anything. But I think as individuals and as people, we should have something that gives us that motivation, gives us that spark, that feeling that we're alive. Whether it's out in nature, whether it's listening to music, playing music, writing poetry, writing books. I think as humans, it's our creative side that we really need to protect. And it's one of the most important parts of being human. And I hope from this, listen to this, whatever you're doing, that it sort of gives you that sort of kick up the arse to go and do it. If you can take anything from this, is I'm somebody who really, really believes that no matter who you are and what situation you're in, you should really be protecting that time, even if it's a very small amount each day, to whatever you care about. So let's begin. So in episode 1, we're going to be covering something that's always really important. You need a strong foundation when you go into something that's really difficult. At the end of the day, when I go into an ultramarathon, one of the most important factors is, what is my why? Why the hell am I doing this? Why am I dragging my ass up the side of a mountain in the freezing cold when it's blistering wind, it's raining, my legs hurt, I'm being sick? I don't need to go into details about everything that goes on in ultramarathons, but why the hell am I doing this? What absurd thing would you do? Would you hate yourself that much to drag yourself up a mountain and punish yourself so much? It's kind of nuts. It is kind of crazy. I think it's important to sort of reflect on that. Why do we do this? Why do we do these hard things? And what is the why? What is really the drive, the motivator? Because the race isn't the motivator. The race has nothing to do with it. Why do I want to train every day and push my body and mind to these sort of limits? So we're going to go into why, how to find your why, and how you can use that to sort of motivate yourself in the moments where you don't want to take action, or how to align your life, your goals, and your sort of habits or whatever pursuit you're trying to do with your why. And whether that's work, personal life, anything like that can really help. And just have an understanding of this can really understand where you're getting the conflict in life. I know personally myself, not having a clear understanding of my why, my values, it was very difficult, especially in my 20s, where my values in life, I was living them in the incorrect way. And I'll get into that in a bit more detail later on. So let's sort of start with why pursuing hard things is really important. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the self-actualization, living your life towards your purpose and meaning, often, the foundation of it is just having your basic needs met, which is food, shelter, water. And as you go up, it's social and things like this. And right at the top is the self-actualization, which is all about finding your purpose and your meaning. Well, this point is really, really important to sort of live a meaningful life, you could say. How do you strive for excellence? Now, if we look at sort of having a good life and we're striving for pleasure, for instance, well, we can look at pleasure in 2 different ways. We've got the hedonistic, hedonic sort of pleasure, which Epicurus would say is the part of a good life is striving for the ultimate pleasure, feel good, wine, drinking, experiences, going out, having a really good time. So you have these moments of peak experiences that sort of, you're having them way more than the negative ones. And that would be a sign of a sort of good life. And then the other form of pleasure, which is more of the sort of Aristotle approach, which is the eudaimonic sort of approach, which isn't necessarily pleasure in the moment, but it's the satisfaction and meaning, like you're living towards your virtues. So you live a virtuous life is a good life. And that can be discipline, doing hard things, all these sort of things that just enable you to be a good person, maybe to do good in the world. And that will create a good life. Now, the research is quite interesting when you look into this, that in both aspects, they can cause happiness, of course. It sort of makes sense. But the research says that you probably want a balance of these two. Like you don't want to be the whole eudaimonic sort of style of life, living like a monk. That's not going to create a good life or life satisfaction. And at the other end, you don't want to be all out Casanova sort of style, just doing whatever you want, taking drugs, partying all the time. Again, that's going to cause not enough life satisfaction. The research, you could probably guess the ratio is 80-20. So the eudaimonic is the 80% and the 20%. So if you can live with like the discipline and the structure of your life and doing good things, volunteering, you're doing good, not necessarily for any sort of pleasure, in immediate pleasure or immediate sort of happiness, but it's the long-term growth of the satisfaction you get from that. And you can look back and be like, that was great. And then 20% of your life should be focused on these feel-good moments, the experiences out in, whether they can be the peak experiences, going to a concert, listen to music, food, alcohol, whatever it is, but you need to have a balance of those. It's having those under control. If your life is just driven by these hedonistic sort of pleasures, and that's all you're sort of striving and getting your pleasure from, it can cause a lot of problems in your life. Now, if I sort of reflect on my life and I can see where issues in my life where I went wrong, especially in my 20s, I was really focused on this hedonistic sort of style of going out, partying all the time, getting these peak experiences, trying to feel good all the time. And it caused a lot of suffering. It's because I didn't have, especially if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my psychological needs just were not met. Because of this, I was just completely out of balance and trying to get structure in my life. And I wasn't ever focusing on these eudaimonic sort of approaches because I wasn't really aware of my own values. I didn't have a strong purpose or sense of who I was as a person. But that's developed, that's changed over the years, and we're going to go into details now. Once you sort of get that sort of understanding that you want to focus 80% of your effort on this sort of discipline, this structure, the stuff that doesn't give you the pleasure in the moment, but in the long term is going to give you that life satisfaction. You want to spend 80% of your time there. So look at some of those sort of practices that you could sort of get, things like running, exercise, meditation. You hear the run is high, but it's very rare. You don't get it all the time. Most of the time running sucks. I'm going to say that as a runner. Most of the time it's hard and it hurts. And especially with someone like myself who's going through an injury, it can be really, really hard. And I'm trying to run up a hill and I'm like, this is terrible. But when I look back, and I'm really happy I did that in the morning, things like that, going out in nature, doing a big hike. I also get it from camping. People always say they want to go glamping. I get a lot of shit from friends about this, that I have a bin bag tent and I like struggling, but I have a really small tent, really small sleeping mat. And I get given a hard time about it. But I think at the end of the day, that is camping. It's supposed to be a bit shit, but you go away, go and appreciate in your bed a bit more afterwards. And I think that's part of it, is enjoy the struggle, enjoy the sort of suffering that comes with it. Smile in the face of it because it's fun. It's about being alive. You're not putting yourself in a terrible situation. You're going to be okay. And putting yourself out your comfort zone really helps you grow as a person, and other stuff in your life where it becomes a bit of a problem, whether it's a traffic jam or, you turn up and things that you can't really control, you can sort of let go and be like, well, this doesn't bother me. I don't really care about this. It's not really that much of an issue. So I think that's an important sort of perspective to have, just having that understanding of where do you get your pleasure from? What are you focusing your life on? Are you getting all your pleasure from scrolling on your phone all the time and having access to that? Or are you actually sitting doing the harder things? You sit down and just reading a book. It's quite a challenge now, meditating or, doing things that require a little bit more work, learning a new skill or things like this, things that make it fun to be human. Are you actually spending any time doing this? And if not, how can you allocate a small part of your day towards this pursuit, towards this challenge that I think can help all of us sort of engage with this life a little bit better? So now I've got off my soapbox. Let's go into a bit more details of this finding your why and how we can sort of structure that. Like I say, there's going to be a workbook that I'm going to provide with this that will have some questions. You can fill this out. It shouldn't take too long. It should take probably about 20, 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less if you do it really quickly. But you can just answer the questions that I'm going to go through in this sort of podcast now. So why do I do hard things? It's a great question. Well, when I used to do ultramarathon, when I first got into it, I was going through a sort of transition of trying to be sober. And it was I'm not going to lie, it was a bit difficult, but I wanted to give up alcohol. And part of this sort of process was sort of starting to push myself out of my comfort zone. And I started running a lot, and I was reading books about ultramarathon runners. And there was something that was very consistent about some of these people that had done a lot of these hard things is it actually come from a background in addiction. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do one. I would get to the end no matter what. My legs would, there's no way I should have been finishing some of these races, and I'd push myself beyond the sort of limits, and it ended up taking its toll on my body, and I sort of regret some of the decisions that I made. But in the end, I would just do it because I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't think I was good enough, that I didn't think I was worthy to, be doing what I was doing right now. And it's sort of, in a sense, sort of punishing myself, you could probably say, more of the sort of David Goggins style. But over the years, my sort of why has changed. My sort of relationship with who I am and what I believe I'm capable of and why I'm doing it is a lot different. I don't want to push myself into being injured forever. And I don't need to prove to myself that I'm doing this to make myself feel better or anything like that. The goal itself isn't the end point. It's not what matters to me. Finishing 100 miles doesn't really matter to me, to be honest. The training every day, being a runner, being somebody who does hard things, that's the most important thing to me. And that's changed. So I need to reflect on this, on when I am going through that difficult time, when I am struggling, what can I use as my why and how can I get through it? So we're going to go into this right now. So first of all, if you're wondering, how do I find out my why? Well, first of all, you need to discover what your values are. So I'm just going to give a sort of definition of what values are for you guys. So values are the fundamental beliefs and guiding principles that shape a person's life, influencing their decisions, actions, and priorities. They act as an internal compass, defining what is important, desirable, and right, determining how individuals interact with the world and what brings them fulfillment. Now, if you're looking to do more deep diving into values, I would recommend a couple of areas to sort of focus. One of them is Mark Manson. He did a Solved podcast on values, and it's really great. You can go in, you can sort of understand your own values, and it's quite a long podcast, but it gives you a bit of an understanding in the history of values. It's really, really awesome. And by the end of it, you'll have an understanding of your values of the world and how you see it. But I'm just going to ask you a few questions to sort of a little snapshot of where you can get your values. And also Brené Brown in her Dare to Lead program has a great list of values. And I'm going to include that in the workbook from her website. So you can have a look on there and you can see the sort of values that sort of resonate with you when you see them. So these three questions are typically what is great. So first of all, what drives or inspires you? What drives or inspires you? From what sources do you draw strength? And then finally, what gives you purpose? So think about what motivates or inspires you. I'll give you my sort of example. So I often like being in big scary goals. I like big, scary goals. To some people, they're sort of overwhelming. They don't enable people to take action. I find that the bigger the goal, the scarier, the more likely I am to take action. So I like putting things out there. I like saying, like, for instance, when I decided to go full-time speaker, I made a decision to close my entertainment website. It's a very, very big decision, kind of scary, but it was a big, scary decision that enabled me to motivate myself. And because of this, I believe that I'm improving at a speed that's way more than if I'd just kept my magic as a sort of backup and stayed in that safe zone. So I completely jumped out of my comfort zone. I've closed the website. I've stopped taking sort of roving gigs, and I'm solely focused on being a speaker. And that's after spending 7 years trying to become one of the top performers in the country. And I made it. And now I'm deciding to do something else because I need that motivation. I need that inspiration. And part of that was I'm going to be building my brand, doing this podcast, and it's exciting. Terrifying, but bloody exciting. So yeah, that's the sort of approach. To some people, that would be too much. Okay. But you can work through that in your sort of values. And if it's way too much, your values aren't going to be the same as mine, and that sort of gets you to know what motivates you or what inspires you. Okay. Not doing just because I did it doesn't mean you need to do it, because my values are so different than other people's. That's the important thing. So that also enables you to sort of understand how to take action and how to strive for a goal. If you did want to pursue your own thing, but you don't have my values, you need to take a different approach or you're just going to fail. Well, not necessarily. So think about what sources do you draw strength from? How can you see it? So think about this. Where would you look for sort of inspiration or strength? I often look for other people and also my past experiences. So I get a lot of strength from times that I failed, which is kind of weird. I'm very quick at bouncing back. If something doesn't work, I bounce back up and I'm like, okay, what can I do? I put my analytical lens on it and try and improve it. I also really like reading books about biographies, or currently I'm reading Shackleton's endurance book with my wife and my newborn baby, Emily. And it's great, and you look at those people and you hear these stories and you hear about other people's stories about things that they've achieved. I think it's just remarkable. And you can get that from movies, you can get that from books, you can get it from podcasts as well. I get a lot of inspiration from that. What gives me purpose? So purpose for me, essentially, it's an interesting one. I'm answering these just as I go through this right now. So when I think about my own purpose, I sort of realized that it's changed so much over the years. For a long time, it was I wanted to sort of perform and entertain people. But now, standing on stage and the feedback I get from my audiences about the shift in their perspective and the problems they're trying to overcome and things like this, my goal is to help people change how they see themselves in the world or how they see the world. Just because I know how difficult I found it, with anxiety, depression, ADHD, all those sort of things I've had to navigate with addiction. It can be hard. It can be really tough. And obviously not everyone's sort of experiencing it as difficult as I did, but there's definitely people with all this uncertainty and this change and the challenges they face in the workplace, the uncertainty of the future and the outside world. Everyone's facing some sort of dilemma or some sort of crisis and some sort of struggle with their own identity and how they can sort of pursue their own version of an ultramarathon, if that makes sense. So that can be anything. That can be writing a poem or writing a book or learning a language or playing the guitar or, riding a bike. It can be anything. It's just something that makes you, you. And I think we live in this world now where people feel guilty for doing the thing that is part of their identity, that makes them who they are. They feel guilty because they feel like they're being selfish. They're like, shouldn't be spending time doing this when I have this other job that I need to be doing and spending 40 hours a week doing. And that job might give you purpose and a lot of them do. And I think that's important to find your values aligned with the work that you do. But I mean, like, there's also a part of you that should be learning and expressing themselves and trying new things and just having a bit of fun. And we lose that part of our identity, I think. We get lost in the noise. And my purpose, I think, is to show that we should keep doing hard things. We should strive for this excellence, whatever that is, and however that looks in your life. It doesn't matter. And be willing to fail. Because that fear controls our life. It controlled my life. I was scared to do anything. And now I would believe my superpower is nearly like just throwing myself into stuff and just dealing with the fear, which I would be terrified to do in the past. It's taken years, but I've managed to achieve it, I believe. I can just say I'm going to do something and go and do it. And I want to give people part of that confidence, hopefully, just by changing your mindset. Anyway, so let's get back to this. First of all, I want to highlight if you don't understand your values, you often live into your values anyway. Okay, that's a good way to do it. But sometimes your values, if you're not correctly understood, if you think that this is how you should be living your life because your value is something, it might necessarily be destructive and it might be a bad approach. Let me give you an example. One of my big values is freedom. Freedom to express, freedom who I am, freedom to act and do, what I like, sort of thing. Problem is, if you see freedom in that sort of way that you can just do whatever you want, whenever you want, it causes so many problems in your life. You end up acting out, you can drink, you can do this, freedom without discipline is just reckless. And that is the issue that I lived a lot of my life with. I just was like, I want to be free. I want to live life to my own beat of my own drum sort of thing. It wasn't until I realized that discipline equals freedom. Having that discipline, then you can be free. And that understanding took a lot of time for me to sort of understand till I became an adult, which was, I would say I became an adult in my 30s. I was a bit late to the game. But yeah, that was really important. And then another one is like sort of experience and fun. And you could say like hedonistic approach. So this, again, is similar to what I said before. The difference between eudaimonia and sort of hedonistic sort of approach. One is ultimate pleasure and striving and experience and satisfaction in doing hard things. I think before I was just doing the hedonistic stuff, the stuff that give immediate pleasure. And that caused, again, a lot of problems in my life. Big part of my value is experience, doing stuff. I love it. This adds to my next value, which is growth through discomfort. I believe now the big value of mine is realizing that discomfort is where a lot of the good things happen in my life, whether that's learning, challenging, rehearsing, doing uncomfortable things, putting myself out there, trying it. And these are three values that I know that align really well with what I do as a job. And my ultramarathon running, it just enables me to sort of understand that if I'm living with these values, it enables me to sort of be the best version of myself. So I recommend you go to Brené Brown, you fill out the workbook, you answer these questions, and you work out what three values in your life sort of show up. And the best way to do that is to sort of find out the peak experiences you've had in your life when you've felt the best or when you've performed the best. But this is in the workbook that you can sort of answer those questions and get an understanding of that. And then once you've done that, you can sort of find out what your why is. And once in the workbook, it will give you a sort of idea of the sort of mission statement. And that will give you an understanding of what you can draw strength from in good situations and bad situations. So for instance, if I look at behaviors at the minute that are going to get in the way of me finishing the 100-mile race, or thoughts that could pop up, behaviors that are unwanted behaviors that I can use my why to sort of overcome. There's sometimes, especially with training, I'm really tired at the moment. There's a lot going on. We'll get to an hour in a training, but I've said it's going to be an hour 15, I'll just cut it short 15 minutes. But that's started to become a bit of a habit. And it's when you're tired and, you're hungry, you can start building these excuses. It's only 15 minutes, but they add up over the week. You do that every single day. By the end of the week, it's going to be, a couple of hours. So now when I've started getting those feelings, I've looked for them as opportunities to sort of align with my values. This is an opportunity for growth. I'm feeling discomfort right now, but this is an opportunity to grow. I can strengthen my mind. I look at these as reps, as opportunities. So whenever I feel that moment, I'm like, okay, what is my value here and how can I align myself with it? Or what's the important value and how can I align myself with it? And so what I've been doing when I've been running recently, I've been feeling that moment where I'm tired and I know I've only got like a couple of kilometers to go, or I've got 20 minutes, rather than thinking, I need to cut it short. But like, no, this is the hard stuff. This is when it's going to be in a race. I'm going to find it difficult, but this is where the growth over discomfort, this is the experience stuff. And once I do that, I can sort of align it with my values. It's that discipline. If I want to be free to sort of have fun on the trails and great, I need to be disciplined right now. And again, it's me talking to myself with my values in mind. So think about this, about a behavior that you want. Maybe it's resistance when it shows up when you're supposed to be practicing something or being creative and you're like, oh, I don't have this. But like, no, think about your values, whatever they are, and then use your values to sort of motivate you and use that self-talk to sort of get the thing done. So once you've understood what your why is, when you know your sort of values, you can use your values to write your why. So it's like, I do hard things to sort of experience that growth through discomfort, to feel the experience of being alive. I never feel more alive than when I'm in the depths of hell in an ultramarathon, it's a visceral experience. And it's because of that I can get that freedom in life to sort of express myself and be the person I want to be. So that is more important than ever. So now you've understood that, you can start living your why. So let's sort of reflect on how you can sort of live your why. Your why reflects who you are and who you want to be. Okay, so that's really important. So I want you to think about this. What will it look and feel like when you're living out your why? What will it look and feel like when you're living out your why? So once you understand that, you can look, what sort of behaviors will you be doing to sort of understand your why? So if your why is creative, I'm a creative person. Okay, if that's part of your values and it's like, my why is I'm creative, I want to show the world a version of myself or see the world differently through art or through music, whatever it is. You'd be like, what actions would you need to take in order to align yourself with that why? Because there's a high chance that you're probably not doing it. Most of us aren't. I know for many years I wasn't performing magic to people. It's crazy. I was a magician and I know that's how I wanted to express myself. I just wasn't doing it. I was practicing, I knew all the tricks, but just wasn't performing. And it caused this deep pain inside of me. I felt shame and embarrassed and frustrated. Sometimes I would snap out of it and I'd get those moments of motivation. But in the long run, I'd just give up. And it was because I wasn't living in line with my values. So think about that. What behaviors, and also the behaviors when things get tough or when you're hungry, when you're stressed, when you're anxious. Think about that. What can you do in those moments to align yourself with your why? Then I want you to think about, if you're going to condense all of this into a personal mission statement, what would it be? And in the workbook, there's sort of a breakdown on how to create that mission statement. So what is your mission? What are you trying to do? I want to help people change the way they see the world. I do this via speaking on stage, podcasts, writing, talking, sharing my ideas. That's how I do it. I have to share my ideas to do this. That's part of my mission statement. I have this, I try and read it most days. It's on my phone. And that mission statement gives me that purpose and that meaning to sort of live my life within my values. What are actionable ways you can live out your personal mission statement? So obviously with mine, it's trying to release this podcast. I've got the studio now, so I'm going to be doing this most weeks. And then it's speaking on stage, which is happening already. So I'm going to continue to do this, continue to grow, continue to try and reach more people, bigger audiences, and try and develop this company as much as I can, this Tiny Shifts idea. I'm trying to help. I have some goals and trying to help kids in schools, trying to work with kids to try and find their sort of meaning and purpose and do hard things. And something I'm really excited about. I've got a bunch of ideas that I want to work with, but I'm really just trying to get everything in order at the minute. But think about yours. What are they? So if your mission statement is to create art, maybe you need to show some people your art. You need to put on an exhibition. You need to lock in a date and give yourself a hard deadline. Maybe it's music. Maybe you need to go to an open mic night. You don't have to, but that could be it. Maybe you need to just post a blog. You need to write Substack. If you want to write a book, just do a page on Substack and just start putting stuff out there. The idea here is you need to start before you feel ready, because the truth is you are never going to be ready, ever. If you're going to learn one thing from any of this, you're never going to be ready. So just do it anyway. That's my approach. That's my sort of guidelines. And I think another thing you need to work out is what or who makes you feel most connected to your why, and to what degree are you engaging with those communities. So your environment has a massive impact on the way you look at your world, and you look at your motivation and how you see the world and your perspective. We're influenced by each other way more than we can ever imagine. How can you set up your environment to success? Think about that. How can you protect a small amount of time? Maybe if you're like, the place is chaos at 6 a.m. because everyone's up, I don't have time. Get up at 5:30 and do it then, and give yourself 30 minutes, and that's it. If this matters to you so much, you need to find 30 minutes, 20 minutes. I think there was a message. There's a story of Buddha. Someone came to Buddha, and Buddha said, you need to meditate for 10 minutes a day. And he said, I don't have 10 minutes. Were you crazy? Buddha's response, okay, well, you have to meditate for 1 hour. And I think that sums up everything that I'm talking about today. You need to do this. Whatever it is, you need to do it. Get this workbook, find out your why, find out your values. Just do something hard. And if you can't think of anything, just pick something up and learn something new. Start learning the language, start reading a book, start doing hard things. Put your phone down and engage with the world. And that's it. We're not looking for hedonistic pleasure here. Remember, 80% of your time is this eudaimonic sort of approach. Eudaimonia is this whole idea of, just do the hard thing, because do it for no gain, no idea that pleasure is going to come at all, because it might not. But you're doing it because it gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. And when you do that, when you live that life, it's going to help you in so many different areas. So thank you for listening to this. I really appreciate it. And I hope that this all looks great. I hope you enjoyed it all. I know this is a lot to think about, your values and find your why, your mission statement. But hopefully you can take something away with this. And remember, this is going to be a 4-part series. I think this is great for your foundation. Next, we're going to sort of work out in the moment when things get tough, how do we set a goal, and how do we break that goal down? And then when we feel resistance come up, which I've discussed in other previous podcasts, but we're going to go over it again. How do we take action on that? What do we do when the thing that we want to do feels like a struggle? Okay. And then you just take action anyway. Thank you. And I will see you next week.